Hello, good morning students. Please subscribe the channel, drop a like, share and comment. This is Shree Vishnu Art Press Publications, exercise number 11 and 12 on the speed of 90 words per minute. Start. It is true that the plaintiff had averred in the plaint that the defendant was closely related to her and she had entrusted the management of the scheduled land to him, and on his request she had leased the suit land to him in the year 1971, and he had paid the rent by way of share. But the plaintiff further specifically alleged that the defendant had denied her title and claimed title in himself, and he had also denied the relationship of landlord and tenant, and therefore the defendant was a trespasser and she was entitled to sue for possession to evict the trespasser. The averments relating to defendant earlier being the tenant furnish the factual background leading to the cause of action for the suit. The averments in the plaint should be read as a whole. If so done, it is clear that plaintiff claims that defendant is a trespasser in the suit land. Significantly, the defendant in his written statement did not allege that he was the cultivating tenant of the suit land. On the other hand, he denied the title of plaintiff and asserted ownership and title in himself by adverse possession, alleging that he was in occupation of the suit property since 1957 in his own right. He categorically stated that plaintiff was never his landlord. Neither plaintiff nor defendant claimed or admitted that there was relationship of landlord and agricultural tenant. To repeat, plaintiff's case was that the defendant was a trespasser. Consequently, tenancy was not an issue in the suit. Section 13 requires an applicable to be made to the special officer under the Act only when a landlord wants to terminate the tenancy and evict his cultivating tenant and not otherwise. When plaintiff's case is that the defendant is a trespasser and the case of defendant is that he was the owner and he was never a tenant of the suit land, either under plaintiff or anyone else, the suit was not for eviction of an agricultural tenant, and therefore Section 13 of the Act was not attracted. The appellant defendant contended that as he had denied the title of the plaintiff, the case would squarely fall under Section 13E of the Act. He submitted that Section 13E contemplated termination of tenancy and filing of an eviction petition against the cultivating tenant if the cultivating tenant willfully denies the landlord's title to the land, and therefore the remedy of the landlord was to terminate the tenancy and seek eviction of the cultivating tenant by making an application under Section 13E of the Act, and a civil suit was not maintainable. Termination of tenancy and eviction petition under Section 13E are contemplated only where the defendant is the cultivating tenant and the defendant willfully denies the landlord's title to the land. In this case, the defendant denied that he was the cultivating tenant of the suit land, and plaintiff claimed that defendant was a trespasser. Hence, the first requirement for application of Section 13E was not satisfied. The student came before the Kerala High Court by way of a writ petition, which was dismissed by the learned single judge of that court, as the student did not have the basic qualification for admission to the course in accordance with the university regulations. It was also found that when the application for the first semester examination was submitted, the same was not accepted by the university, and the same was the fate of the second semester examination also, yet the student was permitted to continue her studies. An appeal was filed against the judgment of the learned single judge, and the division bench has allowed the appeal. For that purpose, the division bench relied on the earlier division bench decision of that court, in which the division bench had taken the view that since the student had completed the course and had taken the examination, the results would have to be declared. Thereafter, the court had also taken the view that at that juncture, the student could not be singled out. The division bench, further in view of the inconsistency, chose to grant relief and further observed that this did not adversely affect the interest of others, and it was too late for anybody to contend that by treating her admission in nullity, somebody would have gained anything. The division bench also took the view that the student had not misrepresented regarding her marks, and yet she was given the admission as a normal student. The division bench also agreed that such irregular admissions were likely to pave the way for foul play in the hands of unscrupulous college, and yet further proceeded to grant relief to the student in view of the fact that the student had taken the examination of semester first to fourth and had undergone the full course. We are at complete loss to understand as to how such course could have been taken. In fact, the unscrupulous college had obviously given an irregular admission, and because of that admission, at least one student was deprived of the admission to the M.Sc computer course. So also it was a complete discrimination between the respondent and other students who had also scored 53.3 marks and were not given admission on that count. The matters do not stop here. The controller of the examination had subsequently rejected her application for the first and second semester examination, which took place in April and July 2004, and yet the college proceeded to allow her to write her examination of those semesters and also continued her admission. It cannot be assumed that the students did not have the idea of all these irregularities. It was obvious that there was an unholy handshake of the student and the college authorities. However, there is nothing on record to support this fact. Further, such permission was clearly incorrect, if at all given. In the subsequent meeting of the academic council, the student was not permitted to continue with the course.